of people on, and I'm so excited to have you here for the very first live stream episode of Own Your Capacity. So, Own Your Capacity is a masterclass. It is a book that I wrote a few years ago. And the full title is Own Your Capacity, Health is Power. And health is an acronym for being honest with yourself, taking inventory of experience, pledging allegiance to yourself, HEA, loving yourself, LT, trusting yourself after all of that, and H, healing. So that is the premise of Own Your Capacity. And today we have a very dear friend of mine, mentee, bestie, all of the things you can name, the one and only Umbar Kassa. Currently, she has just launched a project. She is the founder of the Social Butterfly Effect, and she has launched this podcast as a branch of this work. And it highlights the experiences of first and second generation diasporic people here in the United States. So, and immigrants. And it is, I had an opportunity to listen to the first episode, and I mean, I was reaching for my Kleenex by the end of it, like trying to hold it together and be strong, you know. But it was really a powerful piece, and super excited to have you here to talk more about it and a little more about you. Umbar is a wickedly intelligent empath who has this ability to, because she's a Capricorn in the house, it's almost our season, whoop whoop, who has this innate ability to figure out how to use that mixture and strategize and help people either figure out how they can properly fit what they are, whoever they are, into community, and how they can build community around themselves and or for other people. So she just does this really amazing work, and as a human being, I don't know one that's better. So let's just get into it. You know, let's just talk. Let's chat about this. So tell me, on the idea of owning your capacity, what was the spark? Like, there are steps, you know. You don't just wake up and say, I'm gonna do a podcast. I don't know if y'all out there watching this, thank you all for tuning in, and I'm seeing all these people flooding in. If you've listened to podcasts, I wasn't always a podcast listener. You and Ashley, my fiance, and others always like, do you listen to podcasts? I said, no, I don't have time to listen to podcasts. But I started to, because I wanted to understand what this was. So many people are getting into these podcasts, and there was one point where I didn't know how long it was going to last, and now I realize that it's here forever. It's kind of like, it's like talk radio, but with this narrative overtone, and it goes deep. Some people go into these audiobook type vibes. Some people go into these interviews. Own Your Capacity is going to be a very interview type podcast. It's going to stem right off of this live. But there's an art to that. So you don't just wake up and say, I want to do a podcast. You know what I mean? So what led you to this moment with the Social Butterfly Effect?
Yeah. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you for being here, and I really appreciate this moment, as well as just the relationship we've been able to cultivate. And really, I think what caused a spark was a conversation you and I actually had. And I remember, you know, about almost sometime in 2019, before I moved out to Oakland, I was helping out at Impact Hub Baltimore, and I was just around so many incredible people doing so many things all around the world, you know, with a hyper focus on social impact, or just any impact that they can make on the world in a positive way. And I continued to surround myself with amazing people, and I knew that because of the environment I kept on finding myself in, I wanted to make a change too, whether I knew it or not. I just didn't know how. And so you told me something, the beginning of our relationship, that really stuck with me. And it was like, hone in on the things you unconsciously do. hone in on the pieces of yourself that you do naturally
Mm.
and understand it, cultivate it, and also find people who do something similar so that you can really understand it from, you know, a whole perspective, holistic perspective. And so I started doing that slowly, and I started making friends with like Irene, and I started making friends with Bobby Rush and Joe Tynes, and people who were so well spoken and could articulate themselves in such a powerful way. And it kind of just became this, okay, we have amazing conversations. And usually for me, my background comes from my parents being, you know, immigrants from Ethiopia. I'm a first generation creative. I don't know what kind of creative yet, but I know I'm a creative. And I just continued to hone in and hone in. And eventually, the moment that really like just sparked it all, you and I were on a train headed to DC with you and your partner, Ashley. And I was sitting next to you, and I looked over to you and I said, Michelle, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in life. I know I'm supposed to bring people together. I'm really good at conversations. I'm really good at understanding people and getting to the like the deep part of why someone does, you know, why they do what they do. I think I want to start a business. And you asked me, okay, what's the one-liner? What's the business going to be about? What are you going to do? What causes, like, what do you want to do? And how can you put it in a sentence, simply put? And from there, I just got my notebook and I was like, I want to talk to people. What's a platform I can use to talk to people? There's books, there's podcasts, Okay, like that's it. And I remember my experience in Ethiopia. I did a lot of like mini projects with my camera. Like I just bought a camera and I was like, okay, let me see what I can do with this. I had like 4 months in Ethiopia, so I would just videotape random people and then try to put together a story based on random clips. And I loved it. Like I loved taking different pieces of different moments and putting them together. And I didn't know why. I didn't really question it. I just thought it was fun. And I didn't have a job yet because I just graduated from college. So I was just really letting myself be free and experimenting. And it was so much fun. And so after our conversation on the train, I was like, what technical skills do I have already? And what interests me? Do I need somebody to help me? You know, what are the next steps? So I tried doing little like pieces on my own. And I would record myself on my phone, and then I would use GarageBand to try and piece it together.
Okay.
Didn't go great. You know, it was a good start, but I realized what I actually needed to do. So I was working for So Far Sounds, Baltimore, with an amazing crew, like Kristen.
Shout out to Kristen B.
Kristen B and Tanya, like, are my are so like their impression on me and their ability to really pull out the soul and creativity out of anybody is unmatched. And yeah, shout out to them. Shout out to the fact that they saw the creative version of me first.
Hey.
They really did. And they helped pull it out. So like with so much love.
Yeah.
And so I met a good friend, Ben, and Ben Negroni, and he was the audio engineer for So Far Sounds, does an amazing job all the time. So I was like, hey, Ben, I want to do a podcast. Do you want to help me with the sound? Immediately he was like, oh yeah, totally. No questions asked other than just like, what do you need? And we just started working together. And then Joe was another person who, Joe Tynes, there's another Joe in the mix as well, but Joe Tynes, he was the community manager at Impact Hub Baltimore, and his ability to pull things together and really cultivate relationships and community was so amazing to me. And I knew for this podcast, I wanted to cultivate community in a very specific way.
Right.
That brought vulnerability and just open-mindedness and, just a level of transparency that only a very real and honest person could create.
Yeah.
And he was that example. So I asked if he wanted to contribute to the cause. Immediately, yes. And then my other friend, Joe, I'm so sorry. I always mess up your last name. So, Joe, I want to say, was the kind of individual who saw the vision, and he was actually an immigrant from South Africa. So for him, a lot of what I was doing was a part of his own journey and things that he's been able to really see from a lens that I, was similar to mine. And I needed that to get, to have support as I went through this and making sure we were telling the stories in a respectful manner, that could really, focus on the people and the culture and not us trying to get like some conversation out of them. Anyway, so for a couple months, I was just really focused on that, and they kept it, a clear path for me. And I mean, I had to move to Oakland, and that foundation really just helped all of this come together. So it was a long response, but
no, it's necessary.
So necessary. Like those people, those incredible souls really helped me and this path come to life. And I always think it's important for the people from the beginning to be heard and to be seen, because I mean,
no,
I would be here without them.
No, it's absolutely wonderful. Nothing happens in a bubble, in a vacuum. We often have these people who help us co-write our story in certain stages, right? Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for giving us the backstory of this work. It's very important to give people their roses while they're still here, and to really just understand like the idea. Own your capacity is your capacity is your currency. Whose dreams are you funding? Right. And so when we start to walk on this path of our journey, the steps that we take, we also need to take inventory of who helped us along the way, and who were selfless enough to just say, hey, I believe in that. I'll step in for a couple of minutes. I'll step in for a little while, and I'll help you build. So no, that was excellent. I'm really grateful for that answer. So when you started your journey on this path to the social butterfly effect, can you tell us, what does it mean? Like, what does your version of the social butterfly effect mean? Because when people, just to put it out there, when people go to look for your podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other places that hold podcast spaces, which I'm sure you will let us know later. When they go, they'll see yours, and they'll see another one that's named that as well by another wonderful young lady. But yours has a different affect. And I always tell people, McDonald's didn't stop selling burgers because Burger King started selling burgers. Like, you know what I mean? Like everybody's thing is different, and there's room for everyone to do what they're doing. So what is your version of the social butterfly effect mean? Like, what is the concept?
Yeah. So for me, the concept, the social butterfly effect, when broken down, as a child, I was always called a social butterfly by all of my teachers. And it wasn't in like the most flattering way.
I'm getting all happy. I'm feeling warm and fuzzy.
No.
Like, yes, that's lovely.
You would think, right? No. They,
shame on them.
I mean, I talked a lot. I'm gonna be honest. You know what I mean? Like, I understand my skills, and for me, being a social butterfly meant being able to help people connect and being able to create a bridge of communication between so many different types of people. There wasn't one type of group that I belonged to, and by being that, I could always help people cross over into different groups within, and this is high school, right? Mm-hmm. I was always the friend who knew the other side and knew other people, whether it's like the artists and the jocks, or, you know, the brainy people versus, the stoners. Like there's so many different types of people that we, in high school, once again, that we've sectioned ourselves off. So in my mind, being a social butterfly was the intersection between all of these different groups. It was the bridge. And by being that bridge, I saw people connect, and really create relationships with others that, I'm not trying to take ownership of it, but somebody has to do that.
Right.
And so that's the social butterfly piece. Then the butterfly effect. One, I thought of that movie with Ashton Kutcher.
That's a movie.
Yeah, and that was the first movie, like first adult movie that really had me thinking about life. Mm-hmm. And thinking about what happens, you know, the cause and effect of anything, right? So being able to say that this moment will then create a ripple where something else will happen because of this moment, and because of that other moment, something else will happen, and just creating a ripple effect that we don't necessarily see in real time, mm-hmm. but creates massive waves in the future. And so for me, putting together the social butterfly effect, I believe that by creating, you know, these bridges between different forms of people and creating these connections will ripple into making massive change in the world and helping people understand, you know, why specifically diasporas or first gen or second gen creatives and innovators, how they've gotten to where they are now, and the fact that there's so much that has happened for them before this time that has rippled and caused change, mm-hmm. that we now see.
Right.
Art, you know, structures that have been here for thousands of years have been created by immigrants. Our entire American perspective was built off of, you know, indigenous folk. And the fact that if we don't create some type of communication and respect and bridge to understanding what happened and how that life changed, we won't understand how to move forward, and we won't understand how that one moment caused a massive ripple effect for the rest of our lives. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this podcast and the social butterfly effect is really honoring that moment and honoring those stories and honoring the bridge to the other side. And you know, for me, the tech and a lot of how this came together was not, I mean, it's obviously a focus, but I want people to really come out of this experience knowing that to create change, you have to connect.
Yeah.
And be your own social butterfly.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I think you said a lot there. And a lot of good things. And I think understanding that your purpose in this is to kind of shift tectonic plates almost of humanity, you know, mm-hmm. in a way, and evolve concepts and ideas. And I think now is a really amazing time for that, because one, it's 2020, we're in a pandemic, and people are sitting still enough to listen and to hear and to dig deeper. We're also in the midst of, you know, in a fight for racial justice that has never been this profound and this visible. And that's another, and that's also because people are able to be still enough to see and to feel, right? And so in my personal experience with your podcast, with the first episode that I got to listen to, you have 4 episodes out now?
The third one is going to be released tomorrow morning.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you have 3 episodes out.
Yeah. So the second one is a two-part episode,
Oh,
but
okay. Okay.
it's one interview.
Okay, cool. So I had the opportunity to tap into the first one, and I was sitting still enough, again, sitting still seems to be a theme, to listen. And it felt like you were, your mother was your guest.
Mm-hmm.
Your mother was your first guest. And I will tell you, I don't, and you know me, so you know I don't know much about the immigrant experience. Like I'm an African American, born here. My parents were here. I'm likely no, I'm not likely. My grandmother picked cotton in Florida. You know what I'm saying? Like they
Yeah.
like I can trace my roots here in America, and so I don't know much about the immigrant experience, except for what I have heard from when I was in college. I ran track, and a lot of my friends were first generation something, you know, Jamaican, a lot of West Indians. Track, it's track, you know what I'm saying? It's track.
Yeah.
So in college, you know, that's who you're with. So I didn't have that much insight. And without giving the episode away, I would say that your mother provides a fantastic range of idea and sentiment, not only about what she experienced in Ethiopia, but also what her experience is here in America and how she views the parallels between immigrants from the continent and African Americans. And I think that was powerful. So I'm curious, so that when people go and listen, because I need everyone on here to go and listen and subscribe to Umbar's podcast. This is Umbar Kassa, the founder of the Social Butterfly Effect, for those who are just joining us. I need you to go and I need you to listen to this. But so for those that are tuning in and haven't listened yet, and even those who have listened, what was happening? It sounded like you were in a car.
Yeah.
For most of it. So like what was happening in between?
Yeah.
And yeah, what were you experiencing as your mother was clearly giving you some things I don't think you had heard?
Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't a car. I told my mom previously that this interview was going to happen, but she has stage fright. And so I had to create an environment where she was comfortable. We were already kind of talking about our past. And so I was like, let's just do it. Like, let's just have fun. Don't worry about where this goes or what you're supposed to sound like. Talk to me like we're just talking in your bedroom. And for me, what she shared was how she was able to pass down stories to me as a child, right? There's so much that's happened in her life, and a lot of trauma. There's so much to be said about leaving a country that was everything you knew. Everything you knew. Your entire reality was in one place. And that one place was in complete chaos. And they were there. My mom was there from the before and after. So she knew of a revolution. Yeah. So
tell us a little bit. So I know you, and I know that you got this thing on autopilot, right?
Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you that you're about to educate some people on something that they have no idea about. So please, what is this revolution that happened in Ethiopia?
Yeah, so there were two revolutions. One was something that my mom was really young, so she doesn't really remember as much, but the second one was called Darg. Darg was a revolution between the government and anyone who didn't believe that the government was right or that they were doing good things. A lot of people were killed, a lot of people within most of our families in Ethiopia were killed or taken away or put in prison for, still now. People are still in prison because of that war.
Wow.
you know, and really a lot of it was a regime that was trying to take over. And currently in Ethiopia, they're actually trying to come back. And just massive murders, just a genocide, really. And it's crazy. Sorry, it's crazy to me how like the rest of the world doesn't know this. And I guess for me, you know, I grew up with my parents talking a little bit about it, but really focusing on the fact that they were in, imagine being in a world where if you spoke even slightly badly about the government, someone was always hearing and you would be taken out.
Wow.
That was just the norm. My dad told me a story once about how when he was, my dad, sorry, it like makes me, because talking about it, I thought about putting it on the episode, but it's really, really, really incredible because I wouldn't be here. But pretty much somebody tried to blackmail my father and say that he was against the government. Just
wow.
said it
the Ethiopian government.
To the Ethiopian government. And it was so bad that next day they went to my father's house and they tried to kill him. Luckily, my dad was at work and he worked at a very young age. Like that wasn't typically the environment. Well, that just wasn't something that usually happened, but my dad really wanted to work with his mentor. And that day specifically, he just worked extra. And so he was there at work and the soldiers came to the house, went through the entire house looking for him. They couldn't find him. His family calls him at work and says, like, don't come home, Mogus, like, it isn't safe. And they didn't even know why. They wouldn't say why or what, like, the actual threat was. But apparently, in Ethiopia, you have to do certain things with the government in order for you to be a citizen.
Okay.
And so, because my dad is an architect and he was learning about how to build his own business, they asked him to build a school in the countryside. And apparently, for this guy, you know, his way of blackmailing my dad was saying that he didn't do it and that he ran away.
Wow.
And that he's at his family's house. So when they didn't find my dad, they left. My dad stayed away. He was in hiding. They came back again. They were rummaging through the house, and they saw a picture of my dad holding his diploma, like a certificate, saying that he built the house.
Oh.
Immediately after, they go up to my father's mom and apologize and say, you're very lucky. Because if we didn't see this picture, we would have went out to go find him and kill him.
Wow. And your father was young? Had he met your mother yet,
he was, I believe he was 18.
Wow.
So imagine that level of intensity. And when my father told me the story, I asked him and I was like, what were you feeling? Are you okay? Do you feel like you're still going through some type of trauma? And he was just like, I was lucky.
I want to pause you here because we have some comments and people are saying, you know, that they had no idea about this, and thank you for sharing. Naresa is saying, I have chills. What a crazy story. And I'm seeing things, you know, people just saying that they have no idea. And I thank you for diving into that the way that you just did, because it really, and I'm going to keep going back to this, that people need to listen to this episode where your mother tells her story, and it is so well done. And just listening to you talk about how you created the space for her to be comfortable enough to do that, that speaks to who you are, and that speaks to your work, right? So your work on a larger scale is creating spaces for people to be their authentic selves and for people to feel as safe as possible in doing so. And Audre Lorde says, I'm a poet. So for y'all tuning in, love the poet, y'all know who I am. But if you're tuning in through Umbar's page, or just just happen to find us on here for this episode of Own Your Capacity, my name is Michelle Antoinette Nelson. I did not introduce myself. I am Love the Poet, and I it is what I am, and it's in my bones. So Audre Lorde is one of my mentors through just her work and her essays and her book Sister Outsider. And she says poetry is not revolutionary, it's revelatory. And I believe that poetry is not just even when you write things on pages. I believe that people are poetry. I believe, like you said, you don't know what kind of creative you are yet. Like, I can tell you that you are poetry, even if you don't know that yet. You know what I mean? And that means a lot of things. But she says poetry is not revolutionary, it is revelatory. And the way that I have distilled that and made it make sense to me is that in the revelation is the revolution.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when you are creating spaces for people to be revelatory, that is then going full circle back to the concept of the social butterfly effect, because then those ripples will happen, and those ripples only happen because people are brave enough to start shifting. Right? So, and you even taking the moment to share that story about what happened to your father at 18, because if the truth is, the cause and effect is, if they had taken him, then you wouldn't be here talking to me. Yeah. That's just the fact, right? So, again, thank you for sharing that. And let's talk a little bit about your journey, like your process, really quickly. And hold on, we have some good comments here. Wagila, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's Ygila. Is saying it's weird how these stories aren't shared within our family, and discussions aren't had about all these past experiences. People are agreeing. She says, yes, recreating spaces, or no, someone else says, yes, recreating spaces. My family is Somali, and I've struggled to have my parents open up about their experiences before coming to the U.S. I can't wait to hear Umbar's mom's interview. So that was Naresa. So thank you very much for that. And so in the vein of owning your capacity, right? What we talk when we talk in highlights. We talk in positives, like, often, because there are no real challenges. There's nothing that's really going to knock you down, because we believe in failing forward, right? Well, where have been some challenges? Like, where have you, in the process of creating this podcast? Because I know there's some people on here that maybe want to do this, but where have you felt any hiccups, and what have you done to amend those and to push past?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, like I said, I was living in Baltimore, and my whole team was in Baltimore. And I had a once in a lifetime opportunity to move to Oakland. I had to take it. And that moment where I knew I wouldn't have my team at the same capacity was really difficult for me, because I didn't know what my capacity was anymore. And so when I moved out here, I was trying to get settled, and I didn't do the podcast for a while. I didn't create any guilt or shame for the fact that I started something and then I put it on pause, because I knew I put it on pause. It wasn't an ending. I knew I needed more time, and I'm on my own time. So let me figure out what I need to do next. And once an opportunity came, I took it. That opportunity being Ben, who was my audio engineer, was really trying to figure out how he could help me from the other side. and he was like, you should find another audio engineer. He's getting his master's right now, and so he was like, I can do what I can, but try to find somebody who could really focus on this project. And something really difficult for me was trusting another team, trusting someone else in this really volatile environment. And so I really had to dig deep and say, okay, well, what can I do in this moment? What do I have control over? What can I actually do to get this started up again? Ben suggested getting a mic and just trying it myself. And so I had my baby over there, my first mic, and in purchasing that, making an investment on myself, in myself and in my journey, that gave me enough confidence to say, okay, if I can take this one step, I can take another.
Yeah.
And really focusing on small steps and not thinking too much about what this is going to look like, how it's going to sound, what people are going to think about it. I'm still in a place where I'm like, oh, great, it's out there and people are going to hear it and they might enjoy it, they might not, but that's not my focus.
Right.
My focus is to craft and to refine. And so by me purchasing the mic, it gave me an opportunity to use a tool, my own tool, to craft something and to just try.
Yeah.
And that initial obstacle of thinking, what team do I need, was something where I think for me, it was like, how can I create another support system? How can I push this to the side and say, oh, I have to wait until I have X, Y, and Z things before I can get started? And I really thought about, what I actually needed. Like, what are the essentials to really get this moving in a pace that I felt comfortable with and that I knew I had the capacity for. So I had to be really real with myself. I had to be very honest, and understand that it's a journey. It's a pace towards whatever this goal is. I'm not sprinting.
Right.
I am taking a nice brisk walk and I am enjoying every minute of it. And the quality might not be the best, but it's going to be very real. It's going to be in the moments that, you catch yourself having conversations, stuff like that. And it's honest conversations. And that's all I care about at the end of the day. Even if no one likes it, I just want an honest conversation to be had. And that's it.
Well, I'm telling you, you're already succeeding because I love it. I know that people are loving it right now. There's really not much to not love, if that makes sense. And, it's, we have a saying in the performance world, 5 or 5,000, right? It's still a show. Show's going to go on. And I feel like the definition of success has always been, for me, if one person connects with this, then I've done what I was supposed to be doing, and everything else is icing on the cake, right? And I think that it takes a minute to get to a point where you are really okay with that. And you said something. You said, I am focusing on the craft. You said you're focusing on just making it real and all of those things. And what it takes a kind of inner peace to not be swayed, especially at your age. You are in your mid-20s, and you're a Gen Z, right? You're the oldest of Gen Z.
I'm on the cusp.
Are you on the cusp?
I'm on the cusp.
She's cuspian.
I'm not like I'm millennial, Gen Z. I don't.
No, you're a cuspian. I know. I'm only giving people
a glimpse of
something that they can refer to, as I say what I'm about to say. So, so that they have an idea. So you're there, but it takes this kind of work, this inner work, right? So going back to like health is power and the healing and the trust. You said a word, you said honest, that's in there. To get to a point where you are, I say your generation because this, you all grew up in this information age. Like you don't know a life without everything needing to be tweeted or posted or you know, uh for the validation of likes. Right. So that's why I brought up the generation thing, because that's really relevant to this conversation and to the fact that you're grounded enough to not be swept up into this like Kuro Lotus Yoga is saying, so instant, so caught up in this instant gratification culture. What have you done, or where does that stem from?
Yeah. I mean, having parents who, full transparency, my parents had a very difficult time connecting to this culture and learning, just understanding the fact that I'm growing up with people that aren't Ethiopian, that are from, you know, that lived through American customs. And so,
say what you mean. What kind of people?
white
Okay.
white
Say what you
people,
mean. Say
yes.
what you mean. Yeah.
Caucasians,
Yeah.
yes.
Feel free. Give us the
Yeah.
truth. Okay.
No, I mean, I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, predominantly white. And honestly, the community was beautiful, very connected. But I didn't really have an example of what it meant to live in my skin, right? And to understand my cultures and traditions other than my cousins. But I didn't go to school with, anything that remotely looked like me.
Right.
And so, you know, there'd be moments where I would be in conflict with my parents because there were certain American understandings and white customs, really American customs, that my parents didn't understand. And so I would say a good portion of my childhood was being a culture translator and finding different ways to connect why things are happening in this world, why things are happening in this world, and really being that bridge. And so I had to learn how to communicate in different ways to help different types of people understand why certain things were happening, specifically for my parents. And this is a role I took on, and I didn't have to, but I wanted them to understand why I was doing certain things. And I also wanted to understand why they felt so resistant to some moments, just because they didn't fully understand it. It wasn't anything bad. It's just because they didn't understand it, they would think I was testing their intelligence. And so, as a first gen, I'm sure anyone else listening to this, there are moments where, on a simple concept that you would think is simple, is not very simple to your parents.
Right.
Because they didn't grow up here. They don't fully understand the simplicity of what you're saying. They just know that you're trying to say something, and because you know, I might get an attitude because I'm like, why don't you? It's so simple. Like, why don't I understand? Then they get triggered because they're like, oh, you think I'm dumb, or you don't think that I know things. I know many things, but you might not know this, which is okay. And so I would see that as an empathetic moment, and I would say, okay, how can I communicate this to my parents in different symbols and in different examples that they knew? And just using that as a bridge to understand why I'm saying what I'm saying.
Interesting.
And so that became meditative. Like I literally would pause, and I could feel myself getting angry. And as I paused, I would say, okay, why is this happening? What is causing them to feel that way? And did I not effectively communicate that to them? Am I expecting something? Or like, what's happening here?
So what I'm hearing you say is that you were able to find a peace and patience in being in one world but not of that world, and being expected to be in a world at home but not totally of that world, be in and of a world at home but not totally in and of that world.
Yes.
And we have a question here from Aisha, aka Amazing, here on Insta. What's an example? But I don't know what she's asking for an example of. Aisha, if you're still on, can you type the rest of that question a little bit more specifically?
If it's an example of like what that moment would look like, okay. It could be like a sleepover. So for my parents, they're like, why are you going to sleep over at this person's house? You have your own home. It's not about that.
Right.
It's just sharing space with your friends. That kind of conversation would not happen in a household typically. For me, it didn't. It never really happened outside of like my experience. And so they would just question it, like, why wouldn't you want to just stay at your house and sleep in your own bed?
Yeah.
And so I'd have to explain, like, well, this is why, you know, people do that, and this is why I want to try that, and it's really a safe environment, and da-da-da-da, right? So that's really like the best example I could share.
That you hit the nail on the head, because she said something they didn't understand, and then she says good example. So you hit the nail on the head and totally answered that. And you know what that makes me think of? I know that is definitely probably a cultural thing, because my parents understood why I wanted to have a sleepover. They understood sleepover, right? But I think there's something very interesting about parental units and how they process things, because my best friend lived a house over. There's a house in between ours and a house over. We known each other since we were 6. So we developed social skills together. Our parents know, I mean, family tight, right? At the time. And I wanted, Marcia is her name. She had some jeans, like, you know, and in school people, you know, borrowed each other's clothes and all of that. It was a cool thing to do. And I wanted to wear these jeans. So I borrowed her jeans, but I also knew that my mother was going to have a fit. And when I got home, I forgot to not to change out of these jeans. And I got in so much trouble. And her concept was, and I didn't understand why it was a problem. And her concept is, you have clothes. You have plenty of clothes. Why do you need to borrow her clothes? And I can almost hear your parents' inflection saying, you have a home. You don't need to sleep in somebody else's home. You're not homeless. You know, like, I just hear that parental, like,
there's so much.
There's so much.
But it culturally, we could use culture as an example of why they would have that different perception of what that meaning meant for them. But it could really be anything. It's just the fact that you're coming from a different environment. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean that there is a right or wrong. It just means that they're coming with a different lens based on something that's happened to them and their value system.
Right. Their perspective. Yeah.
So
and Aisha says, like, do you not appreciate what you've been provided? Like that kind of energy, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have much time left. We're actually winding down. Our hour is almost up. And I want to take the time to, one, thank everybody for tuning into the very first live stream episode of Own Your Capacity. The live stream podcast will be coming soon. It'll be based around these live interviews and a couple of other things. Own Your Capacity is your currency. Whose dreams are you funding? And definitely just check it out on my page and stuff like that. There'll be more. You can also follow at Own Your Capacity. And we are here now with Umbar Kassa, the founder of the Social Butterfly Effect. And she's got Instagram handles and websites and podcast episodes that you have to tune into. So we're going to close out with Umbar giving us all of the goods on how we can get into the Social Butterfly Effect. Thank you again for tuning in. And I'll say peace out once she's done. Go ahead.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate this once again. And I'm so excited to see this amazing platform just continue to grow with other amazing people and showing their capacity and how we can own it, and really just an amazing safe space for people to really talk about how they've come into who they are. And my platforms, guys, I have our 3rd episode will be released tomorrow morning. We are interviewing Mimo Haile. She's an incredible Oakland native. Actually, she came from Ethiopia. And when she moved out here, she really just tried to take some time to understand her identity. It's an amazing conversation. Definitely tap in. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and those are our major platforms. I know we're on a few other places, but if you go on to Anchor, you can see where all of the links are. My link is in my bio. Follow me. My handle is ukinetic. And I think we're gonna tag in here as well. And then follow the Social Butterfly Effect Pod. So it's at the Social Butterfly Effect Pod.
I just typed that in and posted that. There
Yes.
you go.
And make sure to check out our website. It's the socialbutterflyeffect.net. Socialbutterflyeffect.net. We'll also put that in there too. You'll get a bit more information on who I am, how I created this, and also all of our information if you want to connect and find a way that you can support the podcast, become a sponsor, or we can also help you create your own podcast. So like I said previously, my goal is to really get this out there, but also create more safe spaces for people to have beautiful conversations, really raw and transparent conversations, so that we can understand what constructive conversations mean and creating a world that's, made for all. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us, Umbar Kassa. This is, again, the first installment of Own Your Capacity, the live stream. We will be back. I'm so glad to have everybody. It doesn't cost a thing to click follow at ukinetic, at the Social Butterfly Effect Pod, at Love the Poet. If you're on and you don't follow, tune in. We will get with you guys, and we're so glad that you are here. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the feedback. And you all enjoy the rest of your Saturday.